Hello friends, this is David Sami with A Christian Journey. Today I wanted to talk a little bit about religious manipulation. How can we spot that we are being manipulated? This happens more often than we think, because for most of us, sooner or later we're gonna come across people with a strong personality that they begin to tell us about certain subjects or certain topics, and it seems like they are able to back it up with the scriptures that we have never noticed or nobody else has ever said anything about this. And it's easy for us to begin to doubt and begin to think that maybe they are right. But all along we are being manipulated into embracing ideas and beliefs that may not really be accurate. But how can we spot these things? How can we know that maybe we are being manipulated and we should be able to distinguish between truth and error? Now, this is a very broad topic. We could look at this from many different angles. But I want to give 4 principles that we should always keep in mind as we get introduced to new ideas, new thoughts, or people that come into our path that suggest things that maybe in our heart of heart we may feel some reservation about them, but we are not able to figure out where the problem is. So these 4 principles, if it goes against any of your conviction, I want you to be true to your conviction and your belief, but consider what is being said here today. So the principle number 1 is when people use recorded facts as mandates and commands. Now, what do I mean by that? You see, the Bible is filled with recorded facts about individuals and events. But these recorded facts, are they commands? Are they mandates? Do we need to follow these recorded facts that are found in the Bible? Or are they just simply recorded facts and we have the liberty to follow their example or not? Let me illustrate what I mean. In New Testament, we see on several occasions that it's mentioned the church at somebody's home, or the church met at these people's house. Here is a question. Are we to meet in homes all the time? Is that the biblical model? You see, we met in a home with several families, wonderful families that we became very close with, and to this day they are some of our closest friends. But is this a mandate? Is this a command? Because it is recorded in the New Testament that they met at homes, but is this something that is to be the pattern for the rest of time, for all of us to follow? You see, no, it is not a mandate. When there is a command, if there was a command that we should meet in homes, now that's a mandate. That's a command that for the rest of time, Christians should only meet in homes. But if it's just recorded facts and it's not a command or mandate, you have the liberty whether to meet in a home or not meet in a home. It is just simply recorded facts. But I know one of my good friends, he gave me a book that this was the subject, that how Christians should meet in a home, that this is the biblical model, this is a mandate. And when I read that book, to me, the book was filled with theological error. But again, you could make a case that it would be beneficial to meet in a home. We draw closer together, we have more time to get to know one another, and all of these are fine. And you have the liberty to either meet in a home or don't. But it is not a command. It is not a mandate. Another example that I have seen that people cite is when David was dancing when he was bringing the Ark of the Covenant to Jerusalem. And I have known friends that go to churches that they feel like that during worship time they should be dancing, and they use the example of David to support their case. But you see, this is the same error. This is a recorded fact for us for what David did when he was bringing the Ark of the Covenant to Jerusalem. But there is no command that we should dance. There is no mandate that when we get together at church that we should dance during worship time. But if you want to dance, you have the liberty. But if you do not want to dance, you're not violating any commands or mandate. It's just simply a recorded facts. So keep that in mind. When people show you recorded facts and they make those facts to become commands and mandates for everyone to follow. No, it's simply a recorded facts. It could be an example that you may want to follow, but you are not obligated to follow. You have not committed a sin just because you don't do it that way. So principle number one, examine whether the person is telling you a recorded fact or are they telling you a command, and make that distinction. The second problem is when people make their own conviction to become sinful. And what do I mean by that? You see, again, sooner or later, we're going to come across people who make their conviction to be sin where God has let people free to make their own decision about that subject. I give you an example of late Dr. R.C.S. Sproul. He was a professor of New Testament at this college, or professor of theology at this college. And one day, some of the kids were playing cards, and the dean come and confiscates the card and tell all these kids that a Christian should not be playing cards. This is sinful. And he overheard that conversation, and he thought to himself, I wonder how the dean would react when he finds out that his professor of theology plays in bridge clubs. But you see, here is an example of the dean's conviction, that he projects that conviction and make it sinful where the Lord has led people to be free, whether you want to play cards or not. You're not commanding any, you're not violating any commands. There is nothing in the New Testament that would mention that we shouldn't be playing cards. Now, a case could be made that, okay, it might not be healthy, or you don't, gamble or things of that nature, but there is a distinction between a person's conviction and they want to give their conviction teeth, and they make it to be sin, where the Lord has set you free to whether participate in that action or don't. But you see, today we have many vices in society. But what do we do with these vices? How can we warn people not to participate in things that are not healthy, like gambling, smoking, or things of this nature? Apostle Paul gives us a good principle to follow in these type of circumstances. And it's found in 1 Corinthians chapter 6, verse 12, where he goes on to say, all things are lawful for me, but not all things are helpful. All things are lawful for me, but I will not be enslaved by anything. We should be evaluating things in our society based on this principle. Like for me, for example, I'm a passionate person. I could get addicted to things easily. So knowing my nature, knowing how I'm put together, I try to stay away from things that could be habit forming and are not healthy, like smoking, like gambling. But you see, it's one thing to use this principle and warn people not to engage in these behaviors that are not profitable and could be habit forming and could harm them. But it's another to make it sin where the Lord has left you free. that if you want to engage in these things, you can, but keep in mind the danger. Keep in mind it's not healthy. And make sure you know your own temperament and personality, that you don't end up becoming addicted to these things where it could then become problematic. So, principle number 2, be aware when people project into you their conviction and make their conviction to become sin, where the Lord has set you free, whether you want to engage in it or not. Principle number 3 is when people use faulty logic to create doubt in our faith and in our trust in God. Give you an example. I knew a gentleman that he believed that if you have savings in your saving account, if you're saving money, or if you buy life insurance to protect your family in an event that you pass away, that you're not really fully trusting God, that you have a weak faith, and a Christian should trust God at all times and should not be engaged in saving money or buying health insurance. But you see, when we are young in the Lord, somebody like that could come along and say things of that nature that would make us doubt, like, if I really trusted God, maybe I should use that saving in missions, or give to church, or give to other things. After all, God is able to protect my family. God is able to protect our finances. So is there something wrong with me saving money or buying life insurance? But you see, this is a faulty logic. And a good question to that gentleman was that, do you brush your teeth? And the person said, well, yeah, I brush my teeth. But the question is, why do you brush your teeth? There is never a command in the Bible that we should brush our teeth. Don't you trust God to be able to keep your teeth healthy? Why do you brush your teeth? But you see, the person brushes their teeth because it's a wise thing to do, to protect your teeth against decay or cavity. You see, we always want to keep in mind that prudence and wisdom are never contrary to God and His ways, but they are complementary. So when you behave in a way that is wise or in a way that is prudence, you are not having lack of faith, you're being wise. And your behavior and your action is complementary to God and His ways, because God is wise. So never doubt your faith or lack thereof just because somebody challenges you with faulty logics or with half-truth. You see, faith is never presumption. Faith is never a leap in the dark and hoping to be right. Faith is to becoming convinced of something and as a result put your trust in it or move in that direction. So always be aware where people use faulty logic that makes you doubt or makes you wonder if you really are trusting God or things of that nature. And principle number 4 is be careful about people's artificial standards and rules. Like when we had a friend that she was very concerned about the principle of modesty. And we had some young people to come to our church that, as a matter of fact, when we were meeting at home, where we were all in a home church, that some of the ladies were concerned that some of the younger ladies were wearing immodest clothes, that they were not really being modest. So out of the best of intention, one of the thoughts that they put forth is that we need to define what modesty is, because many people today may not really know how to be modest. So we need to define what modesty is by creating artificial rules that like how long your dress should be or how short it can be or things of that nature. But you see, these standards seemingly provide a definition for the people that, we don't know how to behave these days. But after a while, these man-made artificial rules, they become the standard, as if God has set those standards. And then we judge people whether they are modest or not based on these man-made artificial standards. You see, we should never create artificial standards when God has not given those standards. That these are principles like modesty. Modesty means basically not giving to the extreme. That in each culture there is a perception of what a modest person looks like, and we as Christians should embrace to be modest in line with our cultural norms and values. You may get a person that feel like I'm modest in one culture and bring that person in another culture where they appear as immodest. But wherever we find ourselves, we want to be modest. But you see, when you create artificial rules for modesty, then you have taken a principle and you made certain rules that after a while, those rules become the norm. Those rules become as if God has given those rules. And the next generation would evaluate everyone based on those rules, where those rules are simply artificial, that they are man-made. So be mindful of artificial rules and values where they bring us into a certain behavior that may make us to become very judgmental, and all along we make a mistake of evaluating people based on artificial rules rather than based on godly principles. So these 4 things to keep in mind so that we do not get religiously manipulated, that we don't go to the extreme, we don't fall trap into half-truth or faulty logic and embrace notions and ideas that are really not accurate. But you see, when we come across people with a strong conviction, with a strong personalities, they are able to project into us these errors, but because of their zeal or because of how they come across, we feel like that maybe they are right. Maybe, what they're saying is true, and sometimes they're able to point things out of the scriptures. But are they pointing out commands, or are they pointing out recorded facts? Are these artificial rules, or are these rules to be found in the Bible? Is this their conviction, or is this biblical mandate? And does what they say fit with a good, sound logic? So, just wanted to bring up these 4 things. Again, this is a very broad subject. We can look at this from many different angles. But I think in my own personal walk, I have come across all of these 4 scenarios that I'm discussing. And my hope is that you would not fall trap into a religious manipulation and that you be able to spot them. Well, until next time, may the Lord be with you. May He watch over you. May He make His face to shine upon you. This is David Sami with A Christian Journey.